Picture this. Someone at a barbecue tells you they set up their own super fund, took control, invested in what they wanted, stopped paying those big fund fees, and for a second you wonder if you're the one missing out. So here's the question I want to answer for you today, honestly. Would a self-managed super fund actually beat your normal industry or retail fund for someone with your balance? Because an SMSF isn't automatically cheaper. And if your balance is too small, the fixed running costs quietly eat the very returns you were chasing. Let's work out which side of the line you're on. Here's why this matters to you in real dollars. According to Money Smart, a typical SMSF costs between $2,000 and $4,000 or more a year just to run. If you've got $100,000, that's a 2 to 4% drag every year before you pick a single investment. And here's the part Money Smart spells out directly. The lower your balance, the harder those fixed costs hit your returns. A big fund charges you a percentage that scales with your balance. An SMSF charges you a roughly fixed dollar amount that doesn't shrink when your balance is small or when markets fall. Over 18 years of contributions, a few percent of drag compounds into tens of thousands of dollars. So this isn't a lifestyle choice, it's a maths problem, and the answer changes completely depending on one number, yours. And here's the part most people miss, coming up next. At a glance, here's the trade you're weighing up. With an SMSF, according to the ATO, you become the trustee. Up to 6 members can share one fund, and you get full control over your investments. But the costs are largely fixed in dollar terms, regardless of how you perform. A standard APRA-regulated industry or retail fund is the opposite. It's professionally administered. It charges fees as a percentage of your balance, so they scale with you. And crucially, you carry no trustee duties and no compliance liability. One is a car you drive yourself. The other comes with a chauffeur. And which one is cheaper depends almost entirely on how much money is in the car. That is, your money. Let's look at the SMSF on its own terms first. A self-managed super fund makes you the member and also the trustee. Under rules set in 2017 and confirmed by both Money Smart and the ATO, you can have up to 6 members sharing one fund, which is how some families spread the fixed costs across more balance. You get genuine control. You choose the investments, you can hold direct property, and you can access assets a big fund simply doesn't offer. But the ATO is honest about who this suits. It's for people willing to stay involved, who understand the obligations, and who have a balance large enough that the fixed costs don't dominate. If that doesn't sound like you yet, that's completely fine, and it's not a failure. Most people are never told exactly where that line sits. It's a tool for the engaged, well-funded investor, not a default. Here's where the SMSF genuinely shines for you, and it's pure arithmetic. The fixed cost base barely changes with your balance. A specialist SMSF firm, Inspire Accountants, quotes ongoing costs from $250 plus GST a month, plus $500 plus GST for the annual audit. Roughly $3,500 plus GST a year. That figure's illustrative, not a recommendation. Now watch what your balance does to it. If you've got $100,000, that's about 3.5% of drag. If you're at $500,000, the same fee is around 0.7%. And if you're sitting on $1 million, it's just 0.35%. So the more you have, the more attractive the SMSF becomes, and combining family balances under those 6-member rules can get you there faster. At scale, control becomes cheap. But here's the catch that flips the whole picture. Let me show you. Now, I want to be upfront with you, because this is the honest part most sales pitches skip. Money Smart explicitly warns that SMSFs can be more expensive than retail and industry funds. Yes, those costs come out of the fund and are often tax deductible, which softens the blow, but it doesn't remove the drag. And the cost isn't only money. The ATO makes clear that you, the trustee, stay personally and legally responsible for compliance, record keeping and tax. Get it wrong and you face penalties, higher tax rates or even disqualification. And that fixed cost doesn't care how your investments performed. In a flat or negative year, you still pay the full $3,500 plus GST. For a modest balance, even a small compliance slip can wipe out any investment edge you were chasing. That's the trade nobody puts on the brochure. Now the option you're most likely already in. An industry or retail fund regulated by APRA pools your money with thousands of other members. It's professionally administered, audited and managed for you, and the fees are a percentage of your balance rather than a fixed dollar amount. That structure suits the vast majority of people, especially if you're below the SMSF break-even balance. You carry no trustee duties, no personal liability for compliance, and no annual scramble to organise an audit. You usually get default insurance bundled in, and your investment options are still broad across diversified and sector funds. The one thing you give up is control. You can't buy a specific investment property or a particular unlisted asset. For most people, that's a price genuinely worth paying. And here's the number that shows why. Here's the big fund's killer advantage for you, and it's the exact mirror of the SMSF's weakness. Because fees are a percentage, they scale with your balance. If you've got a small balance, you pay a small dollar amount. There's no fixed fee floor you have to climb over before the structure makes sense. MoneySmart's core warning that the lower your balance, the bigger the hit from fixed costs simply doesn't apply to you here, because there are no meaningful fixed costs to dilute. You also hand off the entire compliance burden. No audit to organise, no ATO levy, no risk of disqualification. If you're sitting on $180,000, this proportional structure can be dramatically cheaper than a fixed $3,500 SMSF bill. That's not a small difference, it's the whole game. But I'll be honest with you, the big fund isn't free, and it isn't perfect. You still pay administration fees, investment fees, often insurance premiums, and indirect costs. So here's something you can do today. Open your latest annual member statement, add up every dollar fee and investment cost, and divide by your balance to see your real percentage drag. Do that because some funds are far cheaper than others. The real limitation, though, is control. You can't direct your money into a specific property or business asset. And there's a crossover point. Once your balance is large enough, that percentage fee in dollar terms can actually exceed the fixed SMSF cost. That's the exact moment the SMSF starts to win. The whole decision comes down to finding where those two lines cross for you. And next I'll show you how they stack up side by side. Let's put them side by side so you can see yourself in the numbers. On cost structure, it's a genuine tie-in concept, but the impact splits sharply by your balance. If you've got $100,000, the SMSF's roughly $3,500 fee per Inspire Accountant's illustrative pricing is about a 3.5% drag, and the big fund wins easily. But if you're at $1 million, that same fee is just 0.35%, and the SMSF wins on cost. On investment control, the SMSF wins outright. MoneySmart and the ATO confirm you can hold direct property and assets a pooled fund can't offer. So far, the scorecard is split, and it's split entirely along one line, your balance. Now the rounds that have nothing to do with your balance. On compliance liability, the big fund wins clearly. The ATO confirms an SMSF trustee is personally responsible, facing penalties or disqualification for breaches, while a pooled fund just handles it for you. On time and effort, the SMSF demands ongoing record keeping, audits and decision making, where the big fund asks almost nothing of you. On insurance, big funds often bundle default cover, whereas with an SMSF, you have to arrange it yourself. So across these three rounds, the big fund sweeps. The SMSF only wins on cost dilution at scale and on control. And here's where deciding which of those matters to you gets interesting. Let's tally it up. Across 7 rounds, the SMSF won 2, cost on a very large balance and investment control. The big fund won 5, cost on a small balance, compliance liability, time and effort, insurance, and overall simplicity. On a straight round count, the big fund is your default winner. But here's the nuance the scorecard hides. The SMSF's 2 wins are decisive for the right person. If you have the balance and you genuinely want control, those 2 rounds can outweigh the other 5 for you. So the score tells you the safe choice, not the only choice, which means the whole thing comes down to one number, and I'll give it to you next. If you remember one thing from this video, make it this calculation. Take the estimated fixed SMSF cost, around $3,500 plus GST per Inspire accountants, and divide it by your balance. Say you've got $180,000, like our example Sarah. That's roughly 2% of drag every single year before any investment outperformance. Money Smart's rule is simple, that fixed costs should be a small fraction of your balance, not a high single-digit percentage. If your number lands at 2% or more, the SMSF has to consistently beat your current fund by that margin just to break even. That's a very high bar, so run your own number first tonight. It usually decides the whole question for you. So who wins for you? Honestly, it depends, and here's the clean rule. Take Sarah, $180,000 in an APRA fund, 18 years to retirement. For her, the big fund wins. Her roughly $3,500 SMSF cost would be about a 2% annual drag, and over 18 years, that's around $63,000 plus GST in fees alone, before any extra legal, advice, insurance, or corporate trustee costs. That's the control pitch turned into a real bill. But if you've got a much larger balance, genuine investment expertise, and the willingness to take on the trustee duties the ATO insists you understand, that same fixed cost becomes trivial and the control becomes valuable. This isn't about who you are emotionally, it's about a single percentage. Calculate your fixed cost as a share of your balance. High single digits, stay pooled. Well under 1% and you want control, the SMSF earns its place. Here's your decision guide, made simple. Lean toward an SMSF if your balance is large enough that the fixed cost falls well under 1%. If you genuinely want control over specific investments like direct property, and if the ATO's checklist sounds achievable, meaning you can explain the fund's obligations without help and commit real time to trustee duties. Lean toward the big fund if your fixed SMSF cost would be a high single-digit percentage of your balance, if you don't want personal liability for compliance, or if you simply don't want the admin. For most Australians at most balances, that second box is the honest tick. And if that's you, it's not because you're not paying attention. It's just the maths. Run the percentage, read the ATOs before you start page, and let the number decide, not the sales pitch. If you've made it this far, you now know something most people at that barbecue don't. So before anyone sells you an SMSF, do 3 things today. 1. Open your latest super statement, total every fee, and divide by your balance for your real drag. 2. Read the ATOs before you start an SMSF page and ask honestly whether you can handle the trustee duties. 3. Compare your balance against that fixed cost as a percentage. If it's small, control might be worth it. If it's high, you're paying to drive a car you don't need. And this is general information only, not financial advice. Super rules change, so check with a licensed advisor or the ATO before you decide. If you want to go deeper on getting your super working harder, that's exactly what we cover next. I'm Alex. I'll see you there.